Wonderful. Thanks all y'all for being here today, building on our last session. And thank you, Kimberly, for your great work moderating this session. I know the conference has run as smoothly as any conference I've ever been to, and it's folks like you doing that work that's made it so successful. So thank you, everybody who's in the room for this conversation as well. As you can see from the title, we're here to talk about sort of open pedagogy through the lens of this program that we tried out at North Carolina State University called the Open Pedagogy Incubator. And if we go to the next slide, we can look quickly at sort of what we hope the shape of the next 50 minutes or so will be. We wanted to first welcome you all and introduce ourselves briefly, because we're lucky to have some library folks and some faculty here to bring maybe different perspectives on things. Then we'll offer the Open Pedagogy Incubator as sort of one way of thinking about building community in this space around these practices and values. We'll share some lessons from the first cohort that started out in one way, and as many things did over the past year, became something different, but I think has been really exciting, certainly for me, and I think others as well. Once we've got that model established, we're going to move to some small group discussions. We're going to go to breakout rooms, and we're going to talk about how you think about and do open pedagogy in your own communities, or how you'd like to be doing it in different ways. We're going to use a tool called Padlet to report back from those small group discussions, and then open it up for a full group discussion to share lingering issues or ask questions or that sort of things, and then have some final thoughts, and then move on to our next session. We also wanted to say at the outset that all of the resources for the incubator, the call for proposals, the agendas for the different meetings, the workshop slides, etc., and these slides themselves are available in our OSF site. You can see the link there, and we'll give you that link at the end as well. So if you hear something interesting and want to know more, know that all that stuff will be available as well. So with the throat clearing out of the way, let's go ahead and get started introducing ourselves. On the next slide, you'll see that there are 4 of us here. I wonder, just working left from right, Carlos, would you be willing to lead us off?
Sure, thank you, Will. So I'm Carlos Scholar. I'm a faculty member in the Department of Biological Sciences at North Carolina State, and I teach in a program called the Biotechnology Program, where we teach molecular biology to the entire campus.
Thanks, Carlos. And I've already introduced myself. I'm Will. I work in the libraries doing open education and copyright and other such things.
I'm Erin McKenney. I'm an assistant professor in applied ecology. I teach 4 undergraduate courses every year, so 2 in fall, 2 in spring, and I also am the director of undergraduate programs.
Hi, everybody. My name is David Tully. I'm a second-year libraries fellow at NC State University Libraries.
Thank you all. I'm excited to have this conversation, and I think I'm going to get out of the way and David, let you talk some about the incubator.
Thanks, Will. So just to begin then, I think we'll provide some background to the Open Pedagogy Incubator and what our initial goals were and the structure that we came up with back in the planning phase. Essentially, this is based upon our very successful alt textbook program that's been around for the last 6 or 7 years or so, and the Open Incubator that we piloted back in 2019. The goal of the Open Pedagogy Incubator is sort of pretty much to bring together a cohort of faculty instructors and look to help them develop competencies in open pedagogy through a series of curated readings, cohort discussions, and hands-on workshops. The program was originally conceived back in early 2020, and by not 2020, 2019, early 2019, and we began to invite applications in the fall of 2019. In terms of who was behind the incubator, we staffed it with 6 of us. There were 4 librarians and 2 library specialists, and each of us was chosen intentionally or asked to participate intentionally. We each brought something different to the incubator, so we had a diverse set of skills there. Our main goal really was to work with interested faculty to go beyond the first step in open education, such as adapting open course materials, and look to sort of implement open interventions into their courses. We identified sort of 3 main components of the incubator that we wanted to build around. The first one was pretty much like how do we share knowledge, how do we develop skills, how do we provide support in areas such as faculty expertise, how do we center it, how do we encourage student agency, and how do we listen to models of social justice. So as part of that, we looked at current and emerging models of open pedagogical practice, including things such as renewable assignments. And really, we wanted our cohort to leave the incubator with concrete ideas as to how they themselves wanted to implement open pedagogy into the courses that they themselves are leading. So participants are introduced to each of these models. They're supported by our facilitators as well as their other cohort members. They're provided with a small financial award for taking part that they can use to attend things like this. And they're assigned a library liaison as part of like ongoing support for the incubator. So what you see on the screen in front of you now is the faces of our first cohort. We received 19 applications for 6 places, which we were absolutely delighted with. And we knew it early on that if this goes well, maybe we've got a cohort 2 and a cohort 3 already. So how did we decide like who goes into which cohort? Fundamentally, it was about cross-pollination. So we wanted to have a group that was really representative of our teaching faculty, whether that be sort of early career teaching faculty or faculty members with more experience. And we also wanted to go across the disciplines as well. The program was really centered around 3 different cohort meetings. At the very beginning, there would be an introductory session where our participants could meet one another, to know one another, and sort of kick things off there with icebreakers and so on. The second cohort meeting was that sort of mid-semester check-in. How are things going? What have you learned that's exciting? What are you not so sure about? That type of thing. And the third meeting ultimately is our final meeting, whereby our cohort provide final thoughts or final presentations and report out. At each of the meetings, our cohort is introduced to fundamental aspects of open pedagogy, and we really look to stimulate some relationship building. We're all about the community in the incubator. We want to get to know one another. We want to figure out how we can support one another, and we really encourage that. We ask of our participants at the outset that they attend at least 4 workshops. We sort of split our workshops down the line between tool workshops and more sort of practice-based workshops. I think in the end, in the planning phase, we came up with at least sort of 10, possibly a few more workshops that we could create. And we asked our participants to attend at least 4 of them and choose depending upon their interest level and the type of project that they might have in mind sort of early on. So they had essentially like a menu system, and the idea was that they would choose off of the menu. In terms of open interventions, like what the outcomes looked like in the end, first and foremost, we asked that you implement a significant open pedagogy in at least 1 course for the following semester. So this was originally imagined to begin as an in-person cohort in the spring of 2020. And so we were looking sort of at the fall of 2020 for 1 course that has an open intervention. The second was that for each of our participants to make their syllabus openly available afterwards. And the third was to encourage presentations, sharing of what you've learned at the incubator, different academic conferences, and other areas for professional development. Those were our sort of 3 key open interventions. That was the plan as we finished the fall of 2019 semester. But as we know, things changed. So our incubator had to change as well. And Will, Erin, and Carlos, feel free to please sort of chime in at this point. I can tell you that immediately we knew that we had to pivot to an online only, a virtual program, and it was going to look a lot different to what we originally imagined. The start date was pushed back. So instead of beginning in sort of early to mid, I think it was mid spring 2020, we knew that spring was just not going to work. Things were too crazy. We had members of our cohort who were going to be teaching online for the first time. Everybody was getting used to this new normal, I suppose, at that stage. But we didn't want to lose anybody, and we still wanted to do this. So we decided sort of there and then to push it back after consultation with our cohort as to their availability, push it back to the end of the semester. And I think, correct me if I'm wrong, everybody else, I think we started maybe the week or two after the semester finished, if I'm right in thinking that. And with us going into the summer, and obviously everybody has plans in the summer, we're up in the air, we decided to sort of stretch it out. So rather than do it in one semester, let's push into the fall, push it back, give us some breathing space, and do things a little bit differently. So we still had some workshops, we still had our regular meetings, but we also found that it was a good idea to implement things like TED Talks. So in this semester, in the fall of 2020, we met most Mondays at 2 o'clock, I think it was. And each time around, one of our facilitators gave a TED Talk, and then we had a sort of follow-on discussion on a different topic. So though we started with the traditional workshops, we listened to the feedback from our faculty instructors, and we decided to pivot. We think successfully, but I'll allow my colleagues to chime in on that.
Are you looking for chiming right now?
Feel free to chime.
I thought it was incredible. As an instructor who had to pivot my classes online, it was, I don't know, a tremendous sense of solidarity to see that I wasn't the only one. That this is not only happening in classrooms becoming virtual, but also for supplemental supportive programming for professional development. And I thought y'all did an awesome job. It also provided a much needed sense of community to battle isolation and quarantine. So, and being in a space with diverse but like-minded and motivated faculty from across campus really helped me to feel that I was continuing to build community as a new faculty, and support for my continued professional development. It was tremendous.
Yeah, and I'll add that since we were shifting to remote teaching and in our case, the rethinking course design, it was a great opportunity to talk to the cohort about if we're embracing open pedagogy, how can we talk about data privacy and be transparent in what we're doing with our students, and share prompts and share guidelines among faculty members trying this. So it was a really great sense of community.
That's great to hear. I'll also say briefly that move from there have been a couple questions about the TED Talks in the chat. The move from more structured foundational, there are a set of tools that are relevant, and Hypothesis is an example of that in the first sort of half, to those quicker, we call them TED Talks, but we might call them lightning talks, that are much more, here's a 5-minute, 10-minute overview of fair use and open pedagogy, or of data privacy or whatever, that then give folks a chance either to say, okay, I got my 10 minutes, I'm gonna go, or I wanna hang out and ask questions for another 40 minutes. And I'll say we got a lot more hang out and ask questions for 40 minutes than you might have expected, which is always super heartening. I think that flexibility from my perspective, that's what really made it work, is we had awesome people and we gave them space to make it their own. And so folks like Carlos and Aaron saying like, this is what I want, this is what's exciting to me, that's the secret sauce.
Yeah. It was great to, speaking to learning a lot of those tools, which many are technological and online, I think really helped galvanize my transition and motivated me. It helped keep me excited instead of a drudgery of, now I have to flip my classes for the fall. Are you kidding? It was, I cannot wait to try to use these to engage my students. It felt like a very timely answer. Not that we want it to be a plant, right? Pun intended for our background. It's not that the cohort or the incubator was an answer developed for COVID, but it turned into a lot of really helpful tools that I think enhanced students' experiences this fall.
And also a collective wisdom, like, oh, I tried something similar. Here's what I'm doing. Or, oh, and now I can see how this assignment or using hypothesis or learning about OERs can help.
Yeah, I think the best sessions involved me not talking much at all, that it was Carlos had an idea and Aaron responded to that. And then Anna added something. And then like it was, I think what we did really well was set up a framework where we could shut up and get out of the way and let the folks who were doing the work talk about, I love this, this is great, this has been a stumbling block. I'm just saying what Carlos already said, but I think that the community building was the successful part.
I think it also modeled a really powerful framework for being transparent and open. I'm going to keep saying stuff about the classroom because that's where I've been implementing all of it. But the student feedback that I've gotten this semester has been overwhelmingly positive because I have continued that practice of being open, of sharing, check out these tools. It's a little bit of upfront, like learning how they work, but you gain so much by using them. And really, it really enhanced our sense of community, both in the incubator and in the classroom after.
Mm-hmm.
So that's what worked really well. In terms of what we learned that we might think about changing, I talked about the flexibility being really critical, and I think we're going to keep thinking about being flexible in different contexts. So the first obvious example of that is our school, like a lot of schools, is finishing our semester in the next week or so, and there's this like block of December that's totally open. And so the library folks had this brilliant idea. We're going to do like a compressed, like a sprint version of it. The cohort universally said, don't do that. The value of this is that building a community over time. If you try to squeeze this all into 2 weeks, people will learn something and it's, there's lots of cool stuff here, but you'll miss a lot of the great value. So continuing to think about the timing and the structure is something that it's not a change in that we did something bad and we're not going to do it, but I think it's a lesson that we learned, that being thoughtful and deliberate and really giving time to, say it with me, to incubate that sense of community is going to be really critical in that way. So I think that's one thing that we're gonna think about. We also learned a lot in terms of what workshops to offer. I think we heard loud and clear that the initial foundation of open pedagogy is both a set of practices and a set of values, and honoring both of those is really important. But the second half, what we've been calling the TED Talks, was a really nice opportunity for 1 or 2 people to say, we want to know about that. Can we do 10 minutes on that that topic in particular? Things that we might not have thought of to talk about initially. So I think that's another thing that we've learned, again, is being responsive to, right? Don't just say, do whatever you want. There needs to be some structure. But once people are bought in and interested, let them guide you on what aspects of this sort of broad universe of open pedagogy they're interested in and is starting to feel meaningful.
And I think too, having kind of the prolonged structure enables some of the reflection and cogitation needed to potentially fuel inspiration for a sprint session, right? I think that's something that we took away from it as instructors was, by the end of it, we were like, oh man, I really could have done with a sprint session. Now I have all these ideas. So thinking about ways we can prolong our community works, and maybe forming working groups on Zoom or working together on a manuscript, springing through. But I don't know that level of involvement would have been possible without that beginning infrastructure.
So we've got a question. How much prep time did the facilitators need to develop and organize the curriculum before the applications went out? Or did you evolve the curriculum based on the cohort member, on what the cohort members accepted? Will, as the initial kind of, as the founder, I'm not, for want of a better term, I sort of joined as I think this was not underway, but it's in the planning phase, so at least had been conceived. What would you say to the prep time question?
I think there's a baseline of prep that anybody does to sort of know the field and know the landscape. That if you were coming in completely cold and you'd never heard of hypothesis, for example, there would be, thanks, Jennifer, there would be a baseline of sort of getting up to speed. But once you have a sense of like, this is the stuff we want to talk about, another thing we share in the OSF link that Anita was kind enough to share is our agendas for the different meetings. And you can see they're very high level. We want to talk about this topic, and we know enough to sort of seed a conversation, but it can go in whatever direction it goes. So I think that's powerful in that it gives people agency in the process, which you're modeling the open pedagogy stuff you want to do. But it's also powerful in that there's not as much, you don't have to prepare a super polished set of slides in the way you would if you were just lecturing at somebody or that sort of thing. So I think we benefited from having a large group of people involved, right? David mentioned that we had 5 or 6 people that are involved in that team. And that actually answers another question I saw in the chat, which is whether our Center for Teaching and Learning felt threatened or not. The answer is that we involved them in the process as well, and they have been great partners. We actually designed, they have this, it's called the RED certificate in teaching, and we designed a module on open pedagogy that they've inserted into that certificate program. So again, I'm such a believer in like, let's all work together on this stuff. Let's bring more people into the process and have genuine shared ownership of the process. Because then instead of feeling like a threat, it's like, oh yeah, we're all doing this thing that's been great together. So I think that helps answer the prep time question. It was easier because there were a lot of folks, and the buy-in versus sort of policing boundaries question, which is, this is, you know, the bookstore's involved in this in some sense. So we're not a threat to them. We're working with them, etc.
I think in terms of how the curriculum evolved, depending upon what the cohort members accepted, sort of going into it, our initial idea was, well, try and attend at least 4. That seems reasonable. All 6 pretty much attended every single thing that we offered, which was wonderful, you know, and it wasn't expected of them. And at one point, you know, we did say, you don't have to, but you know, if you need to, you know, grade or just do whatever you know, you don't have to attend. We're not expecting it of you, but we were really pleased that they did, of course, you know. And I think it just showed the deepening interest level as the process went on. That, I mean, Erin and Carlos, I'm obviously thinking for you, but that's what sort of came across to me, is that we either really, really like each other, or there's just this subject. There's so much to explore within this subject that our members perhaps didn't want to miss out on you know, that week's session. And it was great that everybody did attend, because again, it stimulated that community aspect, that going right back to the beginning of the incubator, that was something that we were really, really keen to sort of emphasize, that, hey, we're a small community here.
Yeah, I would say part of that, I might not always have felt a deep personal immediate affinity with the topic being discussed, but I wanted to see the people, and I was excited to hear different perspectives and different ideas that the rest of the cohort had for ways to implement these different tools. I thought that was hugely inspiring, that a lot of times, you know, even if I'm sorry, Will, like at first I thought, I don't know how I might use copyright or why it might matter immediately. Like, I don't know. So I'm just going to go and find out, because it's a friendly space where I can say, I have no idea. And it was so helpful for, you know, as kind of a microcosm that embodies all these aspects of open pedagogy. You know, you want to be open and transparent up front. You want to involve people, engage people, empower people. So I thought every session was awesome.
I agree, and it was learning about, oh, I did not realize that that can be incorporated or how that should be incorporated. And in many cases, it was that's where that fits in, or that's where that discussion with students as co-creators, that's where copyright, and that's where we would practice what we're saying. And so every conversation had there was a topic, but we always ended up connecting it to a project or a class scenario or something that applied to not just one member of the group, but several.
So in terms of what's next, there's several pretty exciting spin-offs coming off of the first incubator. Erin, would you mind talking about the paper that we're formalizing?
Sure. So that I need to schedule a working group meeting for. Happily, so one of our last TED Talks was talking about open pedagogy and citizen science. There are a number of us on campus who are involved with citizen science projects directly and or implementing citizen science as activities to engage our students in the classroom. So, gosh, I think most of us in the cohort actually ended up contributing to this presentation. And we also engaged a number of faculty from various departments across campus, just to give kind of a survey run through and a model of there are simple, intermediate, and potentially very complex ways that we can incorporate citizen science in our classes. And so that started, that started this whole group conversation about this framework and the parallels between citizen science and open pedagogy. And then Carlos sent me this announcement for, the Citizen Science Theory and Practice special issue solicitation for citizen science and higher education. And I thought, well, heck yeah, like there's a fantastic opportunity and motivation for us all to keep working together and for us to get a published deliverable out that justifies for some of us, with tenure track and everything, helps justify the time that we want to spend continuing to engage with open pedagogy. So yeah, really excited to keep working with everybody, mulling over ideas.
And in terms of the incubator, the incubator will return in early spring next year. As Will mentioned earlier, we had this, what seems now like a crazy idea of doing it as a 3-week sprint at the end of this semester. The feedback from our first cohort was overwhelmingly, do not do that. That's such a terrible idea. And it is a bad idea. So we listened to them. We've pushed it back to the spring, and it will play out very much like our first one did. It will be due to finish in the fall of next year. So we have some leeway there that we can work with. And our cohort members for the second one, each one of them has been really gracious about just postponing their involvement for another few months. And we still have them for the spring.
The other thing I'll say, and then we'll get to the breakout room and discussions, because I'm excited to do that as well. But I am excited about stealing an idea from Carlos, which is that Carlos has been doing great work in his class with Hypothesis, and he's starting to connect students in his class to other folks across North America using Hypothesis in a similar space. And I think the opportunity to start a conversation between cohorts at NC State is super exciting. But if other folks thought this incubator idea was interesting and wanted to do their own cohort, I think the opportunity to have those conversations across institutions with different institution types, with different, we're pretty STEM heavy, so folks who are thinking more about the humanities, et cetera. I think those conversations could be really, really special and take this to the next level as a thing we all do together, as opposed to just something we all do in different places, in different contexts.
Okay, so speaking of the breakout room discussions, in a moment we're going to split into 4 groups. Myself, Will, Carlos, and Erin, one of us will be in one of the breakout rooms, kind of leading this discussion. And I think we're going to take about 10 or 15 minutes in each of the breakouts to talk through these questions here. And our idea is that each one of us is essentially going to curate your answers to these questions back into a Padlet, and that Padlet is going to be shared with the wider group at the end of the breakout session. So we will be looking at these 3 questions in the breakouts. So if it's all okay with my co-presenters, if we could be divvied up into our breakout rooms now, please.
Absolutely. I am going to make the best effort to make that happen now for you.
Thank you.
Everyone, you have been invited to join the rooms.
And we're still aiming to be back here like 4:40.
Yes, I will send out messages to all of you, letting you know as we're coming to a close in the breakout session.
Perfect.
Does not look like any of you got assigned specifically, which I think is because I assigned each of the presenters a room. So would it be all right with you all if I went ahead and closed out all of these rooms real quick, and I'll just reset it up?
Yep.
I'm so sorry for that.
It's just like in the classroom.
It's just like in the classroom, except for that it's making us wait a whole minute to close these out, which is a real technical difficulty.
It's perfect because Eric Dodson asked in the chat, what helped people coming back every week and engaging? That we touched on that a bit, but this sort of sustained engagement is special. And I think, I'm writing down those guiding questions. We've got tabs on those, so we'll lead you through those. Yeah.
And the rooms are now assigned and open. The one thing that I will probably need to do is move around our hosts. But if you all want to go hop into your rooms now.
Kimberly, is my breakout room the main room?
No, you should be assigned to one. So let me see which one you are, David.
Oh, I got one. Okay, I got the invite.
Got it. Okay.
Yeah, thank you.
You bet.
I'll see you shortly.
Okay.
I don't know about the rest of you, but that was an amazing session.
I felt the same way. I wish we could have had 5 or 10 more minutes, but I always feel that way.
Yeah, exactly. I'm going to fill in some scribery in our Padlet now.
Okay, excellent. And I'm conscious we only have a few more minutes here before the end of our session, and I want to be respectful of those. Maybe I can ask either participants or a scribe to offer maybe one comment on each of the 3 questions. Is there one, how does open pedagogy resonate with you comment that you want to share from the small group discussions?
I'll start. One of our last comments or kind of discussions was really about using this sort of a framework or having an OER kind of console or workshop space for new instructors to help develop new coursework from a baseline of OER, which I think is fantastic. right? Because then you're automatically building community, but then you don't have to reformat if you come in on this baseline of open pedagogy.
Absolutely. Thank you.
And
Is anybody willing? Oh, please. Sorry, go ahead.
I will. Just to mention, we had an interesting chat in our room about the licensing, and how Creative Commons open licensing can lead to that, can lead to that sort of ripple effect of when something interesting is created in one place, then it can impact the wider community sort of elsewhere. And that licensing, obviously, as we know, it allows for customization, localization, so something makes sense for a more sort of a localized approach. I thought that was interesting.
Absolutely. And that is a nice segue into John's question. John asked in the chat about how we got people to agree to openly license, particularly students. I wonder if Aaron or Carlos, you could talk about how you talk with your students about applying that open license.
Aaron, or now I'll go ahead. I'll jump in. I've been trying it for a couple of semesters now, and this semester was better after discussions with the cohort and the incubator. And I can honestly say that the incubator helped me gain the confidence to, from the get-go of the course, my introduction to the course was an infographic with a talking head of me describing my course philosophy. And one of my course philosophy things was my wife helped me make like this Bitmoji of me throwing papers. And I had there will be no throwaway assignments in this course. That's my philosophy. I want us to co-contribute, co-discover. And I really drove that home, I hope. And I teach in a different format, 8-week classes. So week 3, I mentioned copyright, for example, and privacy. And right now I'm wrapping up another course. And next week, they get to show what they are doing, either podcasts or tutorials or things for our open website, a WordPress site. And again, the prompt today was, we want everyone to learn, and we value your contributions and your privacy. Let's think about this. And remember that next week, you can decide how and if you're going to share.
Thank you, Carlos. And I'm sorry, go ahead.
I think prompting it and discussing it from the beginning helps.
Absolutely. Similar to Carlos, but without a Bitmoji. I started out, day 1 of my classes is always a land acknowledgement, talking about the importance of diversity as we are doing our icebreaker introductions. And then as I'm giving an overview of the syllabus and guiding them through the structure of the course, this fall I was able to say, based on students' feedback last fall, I have gotten rid of the final exams. Instead, you are doing a term project. And I'm moving away from these throwaway assignments. Everything that you do is going to contribute toward an open access press book. And I tossed into the chat just this idea. I also work with the libraries to curate exhibits of student work. So a lot of the in-class activities are, create a figure, or I pre-format like template slides so that students are, whether they're looking at Pokemon and seeing how they're, inferring evolution and ecology of Pokemon, that exhibit should be going up this week, I think, at DHL. So whether we're doing that or mapping our global dependence on different ecosystems for a plate of food, right? Just thinking about how are we applying these ecological concepts, figuring out kind of an easy way for students to create something that looks clean and professional that they can be proud of without feeling like I'm an artist or I'm not an artist. Just really empowering them through technologies and templates. Then they can feel, they know that they have done the work to put, to frame the knowledge through research. And then I think they feel proud and empowered to share more broadly.
Thanks, everybody. That's really good discussion. And if you're not looking in the chat, you should definitely check in there. So many people have shared tips and ideas that are really powerful and exciting. I may ask if it's okay to capture those and share them, but I'll think about that offline. If anybody definitely doesn't want that to happen, just communicate that some way, and we won't share it, of course, but there's a lot of really good knowledge there that I don't want us to lose. I also wanted to say this link that you see on the screen here takes you to Padlet. If there's a comment you wanted to share that you didn't get a chance to share, sort of unmuted here, please add it to the Padlet. We're going to gather that up and put that in the site as well, so that we've captured that really good information. We only have a minute or so left, so if we could jump to the next slide. We've said this a few times, but we wanted to share the link one more time. These slides, all the agendas, all the calls for proposals, everything that you need, we hope, to start spinning up your own incubator or to sort of fork it out and make it work in your context, hopefully is available there. If you go there and you were hoping to find something and you don't find it there, really, really, please feel free to reach out, and we'll add it to that as well. The intention is that everything is discoverable and openly licensed, etc. We have about 2 minutes, so maybe we'll go to the thank you slide. And if there's one final question anybody wants to ask, this is the right time for that. Having taken my Zoom 10-second pause that I'm teaching myself to do, I'll say thank you all really, really much. This was a great discussion. As is always the case when I do these things, I learned more than I said. So thank you all. If you're interested in the incubator as a model, check out the resources that we've got there and reach out to us. And we're happy to support or share lessons or share examples or anything we can do to help support this good work. Thanks, everybody. This was amazing.
Thank you.
Thank you. Good night.
Yes.
Yeah, I'm going to go ahead and stop the recording.